Thank you. We're here for the next to last of these workshops, talking about building connection with events. So planning parties, face-to-face time to foster connection between the farm and members. And this is part of the CSA series where we've been talking about all kinds of different aspects of having a solid, comprehensive CSA program. And so events, I think, are a really helpful one of those. We're going to talk, we did introductions. We will talk through a number of these other agenda items today. I've said this in all of these workshops. We are Farm Generations. We're a cooperative, a multi-stakeholder agricultural cooperative, and our product is Grown By, which is a sales platform that helps farmers sell direct to consumer and now wholesale in their local areas. This chain of workshops has grown out of a project funded by the USDA's Farmers Market Promotion Program, looking at the New York City CSA model, and doing some recruitment around CSA best practices and learning a lot from farmers. We did a very comprehensive survey of that model and a survey report that you can read online. And then there was a corresponding handbook for farmers. And that handbook is New York City specific, much more than these workshops, but is still really helpful, I hope, for all kinds of farmers doing CSA in all parts of the country, rural, urban, New York City, Albuquerque, New Mexico. And then there were a number, as part of this project, there were a number of new features that were sort of CSA specific on Grown By. So why have events, right? You could totally have a CSA farm and not host any events. That's a true story. And I don't think you should feel like you're doing a bad job if you are not hosting them. So I'll say that from the start. However, I do think that face-to-face events or virtual events, but certainly face-to-face events on farm can build a stronger connection between the customers and the farm. They make you seem like a real person as the farmers. They make the space seem like a true and real space. They make people excited for the land that their food is grown on. It just, I think, can be a very helpful tool. It's also especially helpful for folks who have off-farm distribution. So this was, again, like partially growing out of looking at the New York City CSA model where all of the farmers are sometimes hours from the city, hours and hours from their distribution. So their customers maybe don't have any real connection to the farm, to the community where the farmer lives, any of that stuff. And so bringing people to the farm gives them an opportunity to just see what's going on. And is this real moment for possible education? And I think the stronger that connection is, the better off everyone is. However, this is not a must do. We're going to talk about stuff here that's going to just be like, some of it may seem like pie in the sky for you, right? Or maybe we'll say goat yoga and you'll be like, I don't even have any goats. So just, I want to say this is not a must do, and intimate, easier, lighter events can still create that connection. Sometimes could create more connection, honestly, between the farm and the members. And even virtual events can be a real opportunity for connection, and sometimes an easier task if there's a fair amount of geographical distance between the farm and the members. Oops. So today we're talking about events as a member perk. There's also the whole world of agritourism. And I made this sloppy Venn diagram to give some sense of like, there are events that can be member perks that you wouldn't allow to be open to everyone. There's agritourism events, which are ticketed, and the point, or somewhat ticketed, and the point is to be making money off of the people who are attending the event. And then there's, I think, an interesting overlap that you can consider, like how you might incorporate those things on the farm. So some basic, really basic member perks might be having a farmer at distribution. So you might say, I'm always at distribution. If you have a farm in which you are the person sort of being present during distribution, your CSA share distribution, then that's no big deal. But if you have a number of different sites, just going to that site could be like an event. You could bill it as an event, have some face-to-face time with your farmer. That could be a member perk. Obviously, you're not paying for that, right? People aren't paying to see you. They're just excited to have a little bit of time to ask you a question or see how tall you really are in real life. Who knows? Work parties are another member perk. So again, you probably wouldn't you wouldn't have people pay to come work at your farm necessarily, although you could, I guess, but are a sort of a member area, something that's just special for members. Similarly, potlucks, which are a little bit of lighter lift and a little bit more communal and maybe make some community. There's some stuff here in the middle. Oh, here, let's go to the agritourism stuff. So farm to table events like the one that Julie was talking about, weddings obviously not necessarily ticketed, but certainly a moneymaker or could be a moneymaker. Petting zoos, camping, like offering kind of camping or like public access to your farm for a price, concerts. And then in the middle, there are things you could be offering or that you could see as member perks. So like a cookbook club or a book club, some level of pick your own that could be just for members, or you might have on farm pick your own too. That's, its own enterprise. Harvest parties, any classes that you might want to run on food or farming, and then farm tours, which I think are an important part of any more member-focused educational event that you're holding on your farm. So that's just to create the scene. We're going to be talking much more about the stuff that's just for members rather than the bigger agritourism piece, but we'll brainstorm some of those. So events for members only, work parties. Work parties are a really common way that farmers bring people out. It means that instead of having like games or some sort of farm Olympic task or some sort of fun event like that, or even a hayride or a corn maze or something like that, people actually do something and do a little bit of work. I think it's important to not necessarily as a farmer see a work party as a great way to get some free labor, because probably in the end it's a wash, or you probably spend more time preparing and setting things up than you would have if you just planted the garlic yourself. But I think can be a really lovely opportunity for your members to get their hands in the dirt, to feel part of something, to feel maybe a little bit of ownership. I think when you have helped to plant garlic and then you get garlic in your share and you say like, wow, like I helped to grow this, that's, as a farmer, you're like, maybe you didn't really help that much, but it feels, I think, like an extra special connection. Work parties are often around tasks that are like a bigger, one-time, easier, like less able to be severely botched task. So we see garlic planting, garlic harvesting, sweet potato harvesting, onion planting. Those are all places where I have seen work parties work pretty well, be pretty successful events. And they're big tasks that on a farm can be helpful to have a lot of hands to do that task. I think garlic planting is one of the ones too that has like garlic splitting often as part of it. And so that can be a really helpful opportunity for folks that have maybe less mobility or are a little less interested in, say, spending an hour or two on their hands and knees to be engaged and be part of the process too. Farm tours, I think farm tours are always a really helpful part of a good on-farm event, meaning a little bit of a more comprehensive tour of the farm, not just the area where members are having their meal or working, but I think helping to tell the story of the farm, helping to tell the story of the farmers, how they got there, and then just giving kind of a bigger farm picture. Farm tours It's very easy, I think, as a farmer to be like, oh, I'll just say some words. No big deal. I'll just give people a tour. But I think it is this really nice opportunity to do some low-level education and storytelling that can be both helpful for engagement, but also for members to kind of know what it takes to run a farm. Potlucks are harvest parties. We talked a little bit about that, but I think potlucks can be a lot easier than a fuller scale harvest party. You can do these on farm or off farm. So if you have a distribution that's far away from your farm, it can be really helpful to find an organization or a community member to work with to host that party, just to get a little bit more engagement. And that can be done along with a work party or along with other events, or just instead of. Classes, these can be on the farm or virtually. We certainly know farmers that offer this as like a very special perk of membership. It can be, it could, that this event, like a class event, could also be something that one of your members could offer the rest of the membership instead of just having you be the one that teaches everybody about sourdough bread baking, or making pickles or something like that. So we really see a lot of this around food education, so cooking education, but certainly you could do classes on other aspects as well. We'll look at that on the next slide. And then just that idea of having farmers at distribution here or there, like a Meet Your Farmer event. We also, during COVID, we saw a lot of online Meet Your Farmer events. I think that can be that could be a helpful pre-season engagement tool, especially if you're sort of doing a member drive and trying to get people to re-enroll in your CSA for the year. I think a Meet the Farmer virtual event can be fun, but I think generally people do love a little bit of face-to-face contact. Does anybody have anything to say about those before we move on?
We do one of the work parties. We don't actually call it a work party. We do a sweet potato harvest. So we invite actually all of our members, all of their families, friends, whoever, and everybody comes out and helps us dig up all of our sweet potatoes. And at the end, we provide them a light meal. We might have, a little wine and some music playing in the education shelter. And it's one of our most attended events. They absolutely love our sweet potato dig.
Do you think that it is more time and money than just paying your crew to harvest the sweet potatoes themselves, or in the end, or yes or no? And you probably would choose to do it anyway, right?
Yeah, we would do it anyway. I've been there 12 years and we've done it every year. It does cost us because, of course, we have to pay for the meal for them, but it's getting them out there. It's giving them a scheduled time. Like they know the sweet potato dig is September 14th or whatever. So they have that on their calendar. Whereas trying to get them to come and volunteer, they're just too busy and they can't make it out there. So they know this event and they enjoy this event. So yes, it does definitely cost us more than our employees digging them up. But it's just an event to get our members together and enjoy some time together and get their hands dirty.
Yeah, and I think to your point about like as opposed to volunteer time, like this is a one-time volunteer effort, and I think that it makes it a lot easier for the farm to be like, okay, we can tell everybody about how to harvest these sweet potatoes all at once, and we can kind of have all hands on deck to like make this happen. Whereas if someone just says, oh, I'm going to come out and volunteer on Tuesday, that means that on the fly you have to think about like, oh, what are they going to do on Tuesday, and what's a task I can give them that's not going to be like really high stakes but also not super boring. And so I think that like some concerted work party like times. I worked for a farm in the Hudson Valley. It's pretty big, called Roxbury, and they had a number of different farm work parties through the course of the year, and like garlic planting, garlic harvesting, and sweet potato digging sometimes. And those always had like a potluck afterwards. So a little lighter lift for the farm, but also just really well attended. Sometimes you see the same faces year after year. And I think as a farmer, it's also like you want to know your members. And sweet potatoes and garlic planting and garlic harvesting and garlic splitting and potato digging are all like boring enough that you can be talking the entire time, which is sort of nice too. And things that kids can be involved in, right? That you can have kids help out with without it being like particularly dangerous. And Vanita, we're going to talk about additional insurance coverage in a minute. Julie, do you do any special insurance or signing of documents for folks who are going to be in the field with you? I don't know of people doing that, but I think that it's not a terrible idea to have people sign, a bit of a waiver saying like, I know I'm here, and I'll be it's okay for me to do these tasks. And I think like with anybody who's on the farm, it's always important to talk about areas people could or couldn't go, what is or isn't safe. We'll talk a little bit about liability and insurance in just a minute too. And then I think it's useful. I know Julie said that they're here because they wanted to know like new ideas. I think it's useful to have to just say some of the stuff that's out there. These are more agritourism, so they're beyond just the member events. So those like harvest festivals that might have hay rides, farm rentals, which I think kind of is in the same vein as like a wedding, but you might rent out part of your farm for a photo shoot or for a retreat or something like that. There are certainly farms that host day camps for kids or for teens. Yoga classes are also a thing that's popular. I think everyone jokes about goat yoga. I mean, maybe not everyone jokes about goat yoga, but goat yoga is a thing that sort of comes up frequently when people talk about agritourism, wine or beer tastings, field trips. You said, Julie, that you have sort of reciprocal field trips with the technical school.
Yes, we do. They bring their culinary arts department. It's a high school. And then we've partnered with the YMCA in their summer camp. So last summer they brought over 400 kids out to the farm. And then, at the beginning of the year, I usually send out letters to the schools and the parochial schools, letting them know that we do field trips.
Oh, that's wonderful. And then do you have to put those folks on as additional insured on your insurance policies when they come out for that?
It's just part of our insurance that we have for the farm. So no, there's no added cost to that for us.
Cool. And farm to table dinners, which Julie also talked about. You pick fields are, I think, an area where we see some farms that just have you pick for their CSA customers, but also certainly there are farms where their entire selling method is you pick. So thinking a little bit about how to possibly include you pick in some aspects of your farm, if that's something you want to spend time on. We see recurring party nights. So pizza nights or burger nights, movie nights. There's a farm here in New York that hosts a once a year dance party as they've like cleared out their high tunnel. And that always seems like a really fun time. And then classes. So classes are an area that I think, it's definitely a very different enterprise than running a CSA. There are some farms that do these a lot, but some that might just offer once a year kind of class on something. So some of the topics that come up on that are sort of, some of them are sort of homesteadery. So cheese making, lard making, bread making, anything around animal husbandry. But then sometimes they can be a little bit for sort of anyone, like any kind of cooking classes or something around flower arranging if you're a flower farm. So sort of leaning into the things you really know about on your farm and offering opportunities for people to learn a little bit more about those. The homesteader classes, I mean, that can be a lot of time, and it can be a lot of time to prepare for something like that. Additionally, the one on like thinking about animal husbandry a little bit, I think this is an area that people are super curious about, and there's not a ton of other spaces to learn a little bit of hands-on information about animal husbandry. So animal husbandry, beekeeping, those are things that also some farmers have given presentations about to their memberships or to a broader paying public. So again, these are not things I would say you need to be doing in any way, but I think these are ideas. I also want to say, like, also farm stays, and we see people who rent out hunting space. In some states, that's more of a thing than in others. These, like, there has to be a budget for every one of these kind of enterprises, right? The same way that you would have a budget for a farm table dinner. Um, you know, we know that some events take a lot more staff time, space time, permitting, that kind of thing. And so something like a wedding is going to be a ton of work for the staff. It also might make a lot of money, but you really have to be thinking about, like, oh, what's it gonna cost for me to put on this event? What's it gonna cost in terms of our staff time to put on this event, and how is that gonna work out for us in the end? So a few considerations about space capacity as you're planning, like moving away from agritourism and back into a more basic, like, harvest party, work party, potluck for your membership. So just thinking about your space itself. Do you have indoor space for everyone if needed? Likely you'll want to have it just in case of rain. Do you have restrooms and hand washing facilities for everyone that are safe and adequate for the number of people you're imagining hosting? Do you have parking? Do you have a rain and weather plan that will allow everyone to be safely under cover? Also thinking a little bit about a sun plan, right? Like there are some work parties, like an onion party that might be at the beginning, an onion planting party that might be in the sort of earlier mid-spring. That might be a time that's really hot and sunny even where you are. And so just thinking about shade opportunities as well. And then one of the sort of legal considerations that comes up a lot in looking at information about on-farm events is accessibility. So farms are not inherently usually very ADA compliant. So thinking about how are you making this space and this event as accessible as possible for members who have different needs. And that could certainly be anyone with a disability, but also just older folks who might be less comfortable walking over uneven ground, or people with children, small children. So thinking about having a space that is reasonable for everyone. And then thinking about safety around the farm. So again, farms can be spaces with lots of sort of inherent dangers potentially. So thinking about what are the places on farm that you want to communicate with these visitors about where they can or cannot go. Thinking about other safety protocols, like say maybe on your tractor and implement line, or your around animals, or electric fencing. So being really clear and communicative about what is a possible danger, and making sure that members are aware of that and are not visiting those areas that could be dangerous. Thinking a little bit about food safety concerns. I wear a food safety hat in another part of my life, and so just kind of like the biggest part of that is making sure you have restrooms and hand washing stations for everyone and that people know to use the restrooms. This comes up for sure on U-Pick farms where folks think like, here we are out in nature, we can just pee in the hedgerows. So making sure that people understand your expectations around food safety and also, not eating or drinking necessarily in the fields and trying to encourage kind of real separation of those tasks. That's also one of the reasons that the tasks, that work parties that we just talked about, right? Sweet potato harvesting, onion planting, garlic planting are a little bit safer because they're taking people away from maybe crops that would have a higher food safety concern. One of the things to consider is not allowing folks to bring pets to your farm. Tends to be a pretty big issue on U-Pick farms, that people are not supposed to bring pets to the farm, both from a food safety concern and just to protect other members. And if you have pets on farm, that you are, being considerate of your members and maybe making sure that those pets either are not around for that time or maybe are, but that everyone's comfortable with that. And then insurance requirements, which we will talk about in a second, or I'll kind of direct you to other materials for, and then children considerations, right? So when you're inviting your members on the farm, one of the most amazing things about that connection between members and the farm is that it can be this opportunity for a kid to see where their food is grown and to get dirty and to be in a space that's unlike perhaps spaces that they're usually in. At the same time, like, it could be dangerous. You want to make sure that children are aware of where they can and cannot go and that parents are aware of what their kids are doing at all times, especially because there might be things that are especially appealing to a kid about a farm, like, a hay mow or puppies or, baby goats or something. Um, so then once you've kind of considered like, okay, what are those things about like our requirements in terms of space capacity, thinking a little bit about your staff capacity, because this is not, you can have a less intensive event, but you're still going to have some time that you have to devote to it. And also some money that you're going to have to devote to it, in part because money is time, of course. So thinking a little bit about the tasks for preparing and recovering from this event. Recovering might be not exactly the right word, but getting back to normal after the event, right? So just like if you had friends over into your house, you might take that opportunity to tidy up a little bit. Likely you're going to be doing some cleaning of the farm, making sure things are safe and put away, making sure everything is like presenting your farm the way that you want to be presented to your membership. So that's probably going to involve some mowing and weed whacking and prepping. Cleaning and prepping indoor spaces if you're hosting folks inside a barn, an education center. I heard Julie say they have like a sort of a covered area that they host events. That's an amazing option if you have that. I've also seen lots of events inside a propagation greenhouse or at the end of the year when things are kind of cleared out, or inside the farm office. Like, so wherever you're hosting this, that's going to be an area you want to sort of clean and prep, tidy. And then of course, after the event, you have to kind of put it back to normal to use for all the ways you normally use it. You're going to want to prepare by putting out signage. And certainly there are tasks for your staff, for you or your staff or your family during the event. So greeting people, directing people, making sure everyone knows where to park, giving a farm tour, and like maybe you have staff that's overseeing the work that's happening at the work party. You may have extra staff for a work party, like something like a sweet potato harvest, right? You might have a lot more sweet potatoes coming out of that field more quickly than you would normally have. So you're going to have, a tractor and trailer that's running back and forth between a storage spot and the field itself, that kind of thing. So what kind of tasks are you going to have for your staff during the event? And maybe are there specific volunteers that are available to kind of help with that part from your membership or from your general community, to maybe help with parking or signage or cleaning, that kind of stuff, to make it a little bit easier on the farm. And then there's a financial question about, say, food and beverage. So potlucks are a little bit of an easier option because people bring their own stuff. But if your if your members are coming from far away, potlucks can also be a little bit tricky. So you may be wanting to supply food and beverage on some level. Or a few things that are like very farm specific, and then encourage folks to bring other side dishes or something like that. So, and no matter what, especially if you're even just having a work party, you're going to want to make sure that you have water and beverages, to keep everybody safe and hydrated. If you're supplying food, how are you keeping that food warm? All of those things that you would imagine from any event, but just things to keep in mind because you might not be someone who's throwing a lot of, large events with food. So just keeping that in mind. And your work party, depending on the size of your CSA, it might just be 10 people, and that is a little easier, and you might have more space for that. But just thinking about that, and thinking about what of these tasks are going to be tasks your staff does, and what are things that you're going to ask for, that you might want to ask for from your membership itself. So legal considerations. I am not an attorney. I am a former farmer who works for a sales cooperatively owned sales platform. But there are a number of legal considerations that come up when you're throwing a bigger events. They might be true with most events, but that are going to be more of an issue the larger your event is. So thinking about zoning. Formal agritourism, where people are paying to do an event on your farm, is like a little bit tricky from a zoning perspective, and your farm may or may not be zoned for actual agritourism. Part of that zoning might include whether or not you can get permits, what kind of noise requirements or noise limitations there are, for something like amplified, like if you had a band and it was amplified, like what are the zoning requirements around that, any collection of money, that sort of thing. And then there are permits. So if you're serving beer or wine, if you're serving food, you may need to have a permit for that. You may need to have a permit to put up a big tent, or to have additional farming or have additional parking. You definitely should consider what insurance requirements there are, because that can really vary. Again, if you're having a potluck and 10 members, I don't think that is an area where you need to be I'm not an attorney, but that is not like a huge event for which your zoning board is likely to get involved. But the more you do on-farm events, the more of a concern some of these issues can be. And I made a comment there on the slide about Farm Commons as Guide to Legal and On-Farm Events, and I will just post that in the chat. There are Farm Commons, usually the great farm legal provider, farm legal resource, really. Usually have to pay for their materials, but some of this more basic one you can see without having to have a formal login. And I was able to see some of their older materials on some other websites, including 20-page guide to on-farm events. It's a little older. It's from 2014, but still has some really good suggestions and resources. So I will post that here as well. There is that. And those are, it gets into the weeds about what is or isn't legal. And those, something like zoning is going to really depend on where you are and what the rules are where you live. I will say the issues around zoning come up especially for farms in more rural areas or more urban areas. Well, they come up in all kinds of situations, but certainly an um, urban farms tend to have a lot of concerns with zoning because they're operating in areas that are not expecting agriculture and the rules around agriculture. So once you've made some decisions about your event, you're going to want to market it. So you're going to market it through your primary channels. If you're only offering this event to your members, so something like a work party where you want to kind of limit it to just your CSA members, then you can use your newsletter, regular email marketing. You can put up signs at distribution or flyers at distribution to let people know. If you're making it more broadly available, so if you're having a harvest party and anybody who shops from you at the farmer's market or through the CSA, or anybody who just sort of likes you on social media and lives nearby and wants to attend, or you want to allow them to attend, you might put that out through social media or on your website, on your Grown by shop, sort of more broadly. Tools to use for marketing and sign up. Eventbrite is really helpful from a ticketing perspective. Even if you're not going to do a more formal thing like Eventbrite, if you're not going to sort of sell tickets or something like that, you might use a Google form just for RSVPs or to help with the potluck sign up, to ask about special needs or accessibility needs that folks have. And then you might use something like a sign up genius for a potluck event or for like volunteer tasks that you want to try to have through the course of your event. And that's if you're holding something like an online event, or a live event like a harvest party or a dinner or a potluck. If you're having, say, a cooking class or an online event, you could be using also Eventbrite or Google Forms or some other sort of signing up tool, but just thinking about how you want to offer that and where you want to market it. And then I made probably a not exhaustive, but a list of the tasks you want to think about as you're prepping for an event. So I think the first and easiest and one that people should just keep in mind for kind of all kinds of things is just making some goals for why are you hosting this event? What is the purpose of this? And I think starting off with, like, are we trying to just have connection with our members? We just want to see everybody face to face and get to have some time with them. Are we trying to put this at a time of year where we're driving a renewal for the next season? Are we trying to encourage folks to volunteer in some other capacity for the farm? Are we opening this more broadly to a larger community and encouraging folks to join our membership? That might be a goal that you have if you want to bring in new members. So just thinking about what are our main goals? What are some of our other goals for this event? Are we trying to do this purely educationally? We just want to educate people about how regenerative agriculture works or something like that. And thinking about what your maybe target audience is for this event if it's not just your members. Really early on, I think Julie mentioned this, really early on thinking about the location, date, and time of your event so that you give people a lot of opportunity, maybe most of a season, to plan to attend. That's even more true the further away you are from your members geographically. Thinking about on-farm or off-farm, rain or sun, backup plan, that kind of thing. Again, if you're just having a potluck at a member's house for the end to celebrate the end of a successful CSA year, or even the end of a not that successful CSA year, that doesn't need to be planned an entire year ahead of time. You could probably do that on the fly. But the further you plan it ahead, the better attendance you'll likely have. What kind of equipment and supplies do you need? Do you have tables, chairs? Do you have a trailer that is good for pretending to be a hay wagon? Do you have hay bales? What are those things that you need to have for the event you're hoping to run? What will you offer as refreshments? And then events, like, if you're having a work party, that's your event. If you're having a harvest fair, are you going to have games or contests? Are you going to have live music? What kind of educational sessions are you going to have? What kind of permits do you need to allow that? Then what are your labor needs? What kind of budget do you have for that? How will you get the word out about this? And then create a schedule. This is the kind of thing that I think is hard to make time to do, but can be really helpful. So just thinking about, like, here's our event, here's what we're going to go do through the course of the day. What's staff, who is going to help with each activity? What kinds of things do we need to do to prepare for it, like cleaning up, doing a dry run of anything that's really new to you, as part of that schedule. And then setting up, hosting, and then an evaluation. For some events, you might have an evaluation of the attendees or the members. So if you hosted a cooking class, you might have a little survey for everyone to do. Coming from sort of a nonprofit background, that's really, really common. But at the very least, it's really helpful to do a little debrief with you and your staff and your volunteers, or your family, to sort of say, hey, we spent a lot of time and money putting on this event. Like, what worked, what didn't work, what do we want to do differently for next year, and make a little space for that right afterwards. Again, you host a potluck, not a big deal. You don't need to do a debrief on your potluck necessarily, but for anything you're really putting a lot of time and effort into, or that you think you're going to do again the following year, I think it's really helpful to consider ways that you want or need to improve it. And then take the event off the farm. So Vanita mentioned, like, here we are, like, closing out another CSA season, and we really wanted to do stuff, but we didn't. Like, what are the ways to still have face-to-face communication without asking everyone to travel to your farm if your farm is far from your membership, without having to worry about weed whacking and cleaning up your farm bathroom, all the things that you might start to read about if I said, like, we're going to have an on-farm event at your farm tomorrow. So just thinking about, like, taking that event completely off the farm. It may be that your distribution location could lend itself to a potluck or an event or a party. We talked to CSA farmers who have distributions in churches or daycares or in coffee shops. So those may all be places that would be happy to rent or give you space for a fun event that is centrally located and clearly easy for all of your customers to pick up. And again, ask your community and your membership. Say, like, this is the thing we're trying to do. Help us plan a really fun event. Who's willing to help volunteer? Who's willing to host? You may have people who are like, I'd love to have 15 members at my house. That would be a great time. And thinking about, you might find ways to compensate them, or just to be thankful that they're part of your membership. So thinking about ways to take events off the farm. And this could be true of a cooking class as well. It might be also especially true of the cooking class because, your county extension offices may have really nice cooking facilities, but, like, your home kitchen isn't necessarily a place that you want to, have a special cooking event. So, there might be a lot of other opportunities to take your event somewhere that is not the farm, but still have a lot of space and opportunity. One thing to think about with that also is that you could invite if you say have an offsite distribution that also has add-on shares from other farms. So if you offer eggs from a local farmer, or cheese or flowers or whatever, like this is a really wonderful opportunity to also invite those farmers to be part of your event. And so that they have a little bit of space and time to interface with members. And I think that can be a really fun opportunity, and also to share the responsibility of the event itself. It looks like a lot of the questions and concerns, I think, are around legality, right? Insurance and legal questions. And again, I'm not an attorney, and I would really push you to, and I'm not an attorney, and I know that some of this is really specific to the actual like city or township or county that you're in. So I think even if I were an attorney, I would probably say something about needing to talk to someone local to where you are. I encourage you to watch any of the past workshops on our YouTube channel. Reach out to me if there's anything you want to add or want to say, or if you're interested in Grown By and how to use Grown By to help sell your farm goods. I will also say we have a number of folks using Grown By for event sales. It's easy to take it all in one spot. So we have folks who have classes or yoga or goat petting all as part of this, all as part of their Grown By shop. So we're happy to talk to you more about that.